this episode of Flying Through Life, we take a trip to St. John's, Newfoundland, and check out the local sights. We departed from Bedford, Massachusetts near Boston, flew over Nova Scotia, and into St. John's, Newfoundland. As ATC vectored us for the arrival, we descended through the clouds to see the city of St. John's, Newfoundland, right in front of us. Directly off the nose is the harbor, with most of the residential areas below and to the left. As we continued our arrival, we got a great view of downtown immediately on the western edge of the harbor. You can see the harbor and downtown just off the right side of the nose as we continued our descent and arrival. We arrived at Woodward Aviation, one of the FBOs on the field, and got a friendly greeting from the Canadian Customs and Immigration authorities, where we rapidly cleared, and that was on to explore St. John's in Newfoundland. After checking into the hotel, we went up to Signal Hill to check out the view of the harbor. It's quite spectacular, and you can see all of the ships constantly entering and leaving the harbor. We also saw our first of many lighthouses throughout Newfoundland. They really are spectacular, and the coastline is as rugged as the people who settled here. The views from the top of the hill are quite spectacular, and as you can see, we got quite lucky with the weather. You also got a sense for how far places are at one of the easternmost points in North America. After checking out Signal Hill, it was time to actually go to the easternmost point in North America, marked by a lighthouse used by ships for generations. We saw some icebergs as we drove out there, even though it was the middle of June. We saw gorgeous scenery as we drove down the east coast of Newfoundland and made our way to the colony of Avalon. Established in 1621 by Sir George Calvert, the first Lord Baltimore, the colony of Avalon is widely recognized as the best preserved early English colonial site in North America. Today there's ongoing archaeological work that explains how the settlers lived. We also got a chance to see how quickly the weather can change and the fog that Newfoundland is famous for. As the fog rolled in over the bay on this warm June afternoon, we rapidly went from several miles of visibility to none whatsoever. Our last sight at the Avalon colony were the famous Gossip Bench and Liar's Bench, demonstrating that wonderful Newfie sense of humor.
Runway heading up to 5,000.
After several lovely days in St. John's, where we took in the spectacular scenery and the friendly locals, it was time to climb back into the airplane and fly back to Bedford. Fortunately, we were lucky with spectacular weather for the return flight. As we flew further south, the clouds did close in, and we were eventually between two layers at 30,000 feet. But we were comfortable in the plane, making good speed, and actually achieved 273 knots ground speed despite a slight headwind. Always good when you're flying in a turboprop. By the time we descended into the Boston area, the layers had cleared up and it was a typical sunny Massachusetts afternoon. Once we landed at Bedford, things were a bit different than normal since we were an international arrival and actually had to clear customs and immigration. So instead of taxiing to our normal hangar, we headed over to clear customs. I'm going to speed up the rest of the video, but I did leave the camera running so that you can actually see what it's like to clear customs on an international arrival in a private plane. The officers were incredibly professional, and they performed an exterior inspection of the plane, used some sensors to check the plane out, and then came in, inspected the inside of the plane, and reviewed all of our paperwork to make sure we were legal to enter the country. All in all, we spent about 15 minutes clearing customs, which is much, much faster than what happens when you're clearing customs when arriving on a private plane into Florida or many of the southern states where they're really concerned about drug smugglers. Once we cleared customs, it was simply a matter of starting up the engines and taxiing back to our hangar to finish up the trip. Much more convenient than clearing at one of the large international airports. You just can't beat the convenience of flying in private aviation. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful and entertaining. Please take a moment to click that like button as it helps the channel out, and I'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button and a little bell next to it so you'll be notified about future videos we put out. Until next time, don't forget to aviate, navigate, and communicate.